All right, thank you, Audrey. So I'm Shelly Stusick. I'm the Go Beyond Beauty Specialist for the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network. Here today with me is Audrey Meninga, ISN Coordinator, to do a little co-hosting and any sort of tech troubleshooting. So if you have any issues, please message her. And thank you guys for joining us this morning for the second part of our three-part webinar series, Backyard Invasives. Today we're going to cover ground covers and vines, just a handful because we're getting into the nitty-gritty. And as we get started here, feel free to keep putting where you're tuning in from in the chat, and feel free to put any sort of quips in the chat and any questions in the Q&A box. And with that, we will get started. So before we kind of really dive into things, I do need to acknowledge that the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network, or ISN, is a cooperative invasive species management area. We work in 4 counties here in Northwest Michigan: Benzie, Grand Traverse, Leelanau, and Manistee. We are funded in part by the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, which funds me in particular, but also we have funding from the Good Neighbor Authority. And here are some of our major partners listed. We could not do the work in all of our 4 counties and throughout the state without our partnerships with all these great folks, including the Grand Traverse Conservation District, which is our fiduciary. So ISN's current program is just a little bit about us. I'm the Go Beyond Beauty Program Specialist. So we will get to talk about Go Beyond Beauty. It's an anti-ornamental invasive species outreach program, but ISN also does invasive species control, on the ground control. These are typically high priority species in high quality habitats, and are early detection species, things that aren't quite here yet, but things that are here, but we kind of want to get into those before they become a huge widespread problem. Things like Japanese knotweed, invasive bittersweet, garlic mustard, Phragmites, that sort of thing. We do work fees and volunteer events with the public and other organizations, and we do a lot of outreach. We like to joke that we will talk to folks, present to anyone who will sit down long enough to listen, and that includes you guys today. And it's easy to get into the doom and gloom of invasive species, but when we really think about why we're doing the work that we're doing, it's because habitat matters. Habitat matters for people, whether you like to recreate outside, especially during the pandemic. Habitat matters for wildlife, of course, for their tight connections that wildlife have with their native food sources. And then habitat certainly matters for Northwest Michigan. Our economy is really, and our industries are really tightly linked to our habitat that we have here. You know, not only our agriculture and our wineries and things like that, but in our timber industries, our fisheries, but our tourism as well. People come up here to hike, to see the trillium in the spring, not necessarily the fields of garlic mustard in the spring. And monarch butterflies are a really great example of why habitat matters. And they're kind of the poster child, you know, monarch butterflies. Everyone really gets the connection between monarchs and milkweeds. They have a one-to-one connection. You know, monarchs can get nectar from a myriad of different flowering plants, but they cannot continue their life cycle without milkweeds. And so this connection is not unique to monarch butterflies. This exists with a myriad of different native insects and wildlife. Here are a few examples. Locally, the double-toothed prominent with elm, northern spicebush swallowtail with spicebush and sassafras, and the Pandora sphinx moth with Virginia creeper. And when you think about how many species can woody plants in particular for this, how many species of butterflies and moths can woody plants support? When you think about our birds who need caterpillars for their young, we have the oak species that are supporting over 500 of just moths and butterflies. That's not even mammals, that's not anything else. And so as you go down this list here, I did list a non-native species, Ginkgo biloba, ginkgo trees, really cute trees. But they only support 5 species of moths and butterflies. So when you think about habitat, And we use the example of one brood of chickadees needs 6,000 caterpillars to raise one brood of chickadees, black-capped chickadees. What are you going to plant if you want to support habitat for birds? You know, you would probably want a lot more oaks, a lot more willows, cherries, plums versus non-native species, and then of course invasive species who support even less. But native plants are important because they co-evolved with native insects. They have that relationship. And in the invasive species world, you can't tell people what to not put in their gardens or not or manage in their spaces without telling them what to plant, what to hone in on, and that's native plants. And so I really like to challenge folks' idea of conservation. I think a lot of folks think that conservation is a thing that Sleeping Bear does or that natural resource professionals do, and not something that can really be enacted at home. So conservation is not a preservation of an already pristine place. If anything, fragmented habitats, you know, with urban sprawl and things like that, means that there's a greater need for connecting spaces, for connecting those great swaths of land to other swaths of land. They need kind of stopover places. And that's where home landscapes can really come into play in creating habitat. Plant management is just one aspect of conservation, like we'll talk about today. There's many other things that you can do at home, but I would like you to look outside your front door and say, this is habitat. And I joke that everyone has habitat outside of their front door, whether it's really good habitat, who it's really serving, whether it's serving our wildlife and our pollinators or not really, that's up for debate. But if nothing's nibbling in your landscape, is it really providing habitat? And so I challenge folks to think about this when they're picking out plants or gardening. And people throw around the word invasive a lot. The formal definition is a non-native species that harms people, the environment, or the economy. This can be an animal, ISN, you know, insect, that sort of thing. ISN focuses on terrestrial invasive plants. And, you know, invasive species are introduced, intentional or otherwise, and they're typically, so they have to be non-native. They typically have very few natural predators in their introduced space. And typically they have a massive seed production or ways of growing. And so I would like to point out that not all non-natives are invasive, but all invasives are non-native. So people like don't like poison ivy, or you know, some people don't like wild grape in their spaces, but those are native plants and by definition not invasive. But not all non-natives are, you know, bad. For every 100 introduced, 10 naturalize, are able to reproduce, and then one becomes invasive out of those. And so the purple loosestrife beetle is a great example of that one-to-one connection like the monarch butterflies have with milkweeds. We use purple loosestrife for a biocontrol for purple loosestrife. And that, you know, if there's no purple loosestrife, then there's no Galarucella beetles. And so that's a good example of harnessing that one-to-one connection. And invasive, just to quickly note on invasive species prioritization, we call this the invasion curve. And we like to do outreach and treatments on species that are kind of in this introduction detection area. Not necessarily, you know, folks know about autumn olive, they know about other species that are kind of widespread. And so when ISN is doing outreach or other organizations, it's not necessarily on what's the most widespread or the most invasive. It's our priority species that we have kind of a glimmering chance to try to not necessarily eradicate, but get to a very, very manageable level. And so I want folks to kind of keep that in mind. You know, we'd rather pick this garlic mustard when it's just one versus a whole colony, that kind of thing. It's about using our resources effectively. And I want you guys to keep that in mind when we talk about ground covers and vines that may or may not be in your spaces. And invasives get here, invasives are introduced, whether accidentally or intentionally. You know, they can be, a majority of them were planted intentionally for erosion, things that were thought to be good for wildlife, for gardens with the Go Beyond Beauty program, or food and medicine. And they can be transported. I like to put these images up here, a myriad of different ways just to get folks thinking about their gear, about when you travel and when you camp in different areas, the boot brush stations when you're at hiking trails, to be sure to use those because any sort of dirt or anything like that, even my cute pup can transport unintentionally seeds. And so to just be thinking about that in particular with your vehicles when you go recreating, and then also, of course, wildlife. So the Go Beyond Beauty program is a voluntary, non-regulatory, but celebratory grassroots program, an anti-ornamental invasives program. So the invasive species that were historically or contemporarily, currently introduced into gardens for ornamental purposes, you know, just basically the beauty of it. But we're asking folks to go above and beyond just the beauty and going above and beyond current Michigan regulations. So Michigan, compared to other Midwestern states, does not have as many environmental regulations when it comes to invasive species as say Wisconsin or something like that. And so this grassroots program attempts to kind of get ornamental invasives out of the line of sale. The ones that we're managing in natural areas, we want to encourage folks to not plant or to not sell. And so that's the ultimate goal, is to disuse high priority ornamental invasive species. I like to joke it's not even all invasives. You know, there are great native plant programs, there are great, you know, gardening clubs, that sort of thing. We're trying to get folks to think about the ornamental invasive species they're planting and to encourage folks to plant native instead. So this program is for nurseries, landscapers, designers, garden centers, you know, trying to get them out of the line of sale, but also on the other end of demand, anyone with a garden, whether it be, you know, a law office with a landscape, a business could join as a community participant like that, or a homeowner. You may recognize some of these local businesses in our 4 counties. These folks have all committed to not use high priority ornamental invasives in their businesses, which is amazing. I was brought on to expand this Go Beyond Beauty program statewide, and this will look like ISN empowering hubs, other organizations that enact the program in their area, and we will be offering Go Beyond Beauty at the base level. And so some of the events and things that I talk about that are local to our area are not part of that statewide expansion. And so just to keep that in mind, I'll give you a little info, but then we'll get into the species that you all came here for. If you're local in our 4 counties, we do have a Go Beyond Beauty Achievement Program for natural resource or horticultural professionals, whether they want trainings for staff on ornamental invasives and native replacements, that sort of thing, like Old Mission Associates did with us a few years back. We also have achievement levels for non-garden professionals. And the Go Beyond Beauty program is a voluntary free program. In general, these are specific, the achievement program is for a minimal fee. And that's just because of the staff time, and we were asked to kind of provide these opportunities. And so if you are a non-horticultural business or homeowner, you can get a invasive species site visit and a report about what you have in your home, and native plant recommendations as well based on site conditions if you're local here. And then participant materials and resources, we give out signs, stickers, outreach and educational material. Very relevant to this webinar today is our Plan Before You Plant brochure, which is kind of highlighted at the top here, where we say, hey, do you like the look of this invasive, like baby's breath you can see there? And then it gives 3 native plant suggestions that either look very similar or fulfill the same kind of ecological function as those invasives. And we also, Go Beyond Beauty has its own social media to recognize participants in real time and kind of educate more on the like ornamental gardening side of things in the invasive species world. And what species are we talking about for the to participate in the Go Beyond Beauty program? Here's our full list. Some of these species are already state restricted, so no one's selling them anyway. But there's a full list you can find online where it's 4 pages of what's been historically invasive, what's the qualifier for the program. And if you're curious about what's been invasive in our area ornamentally, please check that out. I do want to point out the red arrows are ISN's top 12 least wanted species. So this points out that out of all, like, ISN as an organization, a lot of these species that we're concerned with are ornamentals. So if we have the top 12 here, all the ones that are circled are still legally sold today, but are things that ISN is prioritizing as a program and concerned about in our area. And then what I get a lot of people, you know, when I'm at events and things like that, people say, oh, well, this can't be invasive. I don't see it spreading in my yard. And aside from the fact that a lot of people mow or mulch around their ornamental plants in their yard, there's things going on behind the scenes that you might not see, even if you don't see it suckering in your yard, which is wildlife, birds in particular. And so everyone loves our migrating songbirds. We want to do everything we can to help them, but they do unfortunately spread some seeds into people's back 40s, you know, natural areas where people don't aren't as maybe accessible, and they can end up causing unintentionally some infestations that don't get noticed for, you know, potentially a few years. It depends on where it is. And so that can cause huge issues. And the irony of this whole thing is that the reasons why ornamental invasives are popular are the same reasons why they are issues. And so there's nothing to keep them in check if there's no natural predators. People like perfect leaves. They don't want shoot-on leaves. Well, great. Invasives don't. Nothing's eating them, at least in their introduced space. And so no animal herbivory, not many pests are going to kind of keep their populations in check. And typically a lot of them, especially woody invasives, have prolific seed production. And people like that. People like bright red berries. They like, you know, berries holding onto the plant into winter. They like the look of it. They like the beauty of it. And the Go Beyond Beauty species to get into the program are, you know, we listed those species, but they also include all cultivars. We've kind of been burned before with invasive cultivars where people and seed companies will say, oh, here's a sterile variety, it doesn't seed. Well, we have issues with that in the past, especially even with Japanese barberry, which is shown in the photo there, about things hybridizing with their native counterparts, or losing those selected gene traits as they naturalize into natural areas, such as Japanese barberry. They have, you know, red cultivars, and sometimes that ends up turning back into green when it invades other areas. And so that can happen with other traits, including sterility in its seed production. So getting into our species here today, we have a couple vines and a couple invasive ground covers to go over, and then native replacements. We got some feedback on our last webinar that said we wanted a little bit more time on invasive replacements, or invasive replacements, native species. So we'll get into that. So you guys may or may not have heard of invasive bittersweet, also called, not very politically correctly, oriental bittersweet. This is a woody twining vine native to Asia, introduced a few hundred years ago, planted for ornamental purposes like everything we'll talk about. This is also planted intentionally for erosion control and highway landscaping due to its ability to sucker. And this is something that is found in so many dried flower arrangements, but in particular winter wreaths around winter time. Now that you've seen it, I'm going to curse you all with being able to recognize it in a lot of different winter arrangements later this year. It has bright red fruit that persists into winter. Like most invasives, this plant is like really low maintenance, and that's why they liked it in the first place, a little too low maintenance. And this is often mislabeled as the native variety. We have a native bittersweet, an American bittersweet. So it has oval leaves, And you will definitely, if this is in your garden, you will definitely notice it does not behave and stay small. And it spreads mostly through seeds, but it also is an aggressive grower as well. It's transported by birds and humans. Like I said, for the ornamental aspects, humans will put it everywhere. They'll, maybe not, they'll maybe put it out in their compost pile. That's really just kind of like a pile on the edge of the woods, that kind of thing. And it can spread like that. As you can see, bittersweet is not in Michigan, it's not regulated, but it is regulated in a lot of other Midwestern states, and for a good reason. This is a species that invades forest edges, open woodlands, hedgerows, and then it can also infiltrate the interior woodlands due to its extreme shade tolerance. So it can both take the sun, a full sun and full shade. The threat to habitat is that, like all invasive species, they harm native species. This one in particular can girdle native trees and weight burden trees and create them, have them be more susceptible to like wind and ice damage. It reduces photosynthesis. I mean, you can see this photo right here, and it can shade out species that it's climbing or just species nearby. And then of course it outcompetes native species by its prolific seed production, nothing keeping it in check, and it's a very fast grower. So how to tell the native and invasive bittersweets apart, it is kind of tricky. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Unless the plant is fruiting, it's a little hard to tell, but what I particularly use to distinguish the two are the terminals of where are the fruits, where are the flowers? Are they along the branch at each terminal, or are they, are they along the entire vine, or are they at the terminal end of the branch, like the end? The the native bittersweet, those are the ones at the end, where it's just, you have this long kind of spindly vine, and then at the end, you'll have this fruit clusters. The fruit clusters look very similar, actually, because they have similar sheaths. That's not really shown there. But the invasive bittersweet, you will see prolific berries all along the vine. And you can notice that obviously mostly in late summer when they start to fruit. And then the invasive bittersweet has a little bit more rounded leaves as well. So invasive bittersweet is a high priority species, not only because it causes harm to the environment, but it also is genetically competing with the native species. And so it can hybridize with the native species. If you had them side by side, you would basically have two invasive plants. And so because of that, the native bittersweet species is listed as a species of special concern and cannot be cut or transported without a bill of sale or proof of ownership, just because a lot of people are selling what they advertise as the American bittersweet, and it's actually invasive bittersweet. So a little extra special with that species there. So some native alternatives to bittersweet can include two of my favorites here, possibly my favorite native vine. We have a native clematis. If you're a gardener, everyone kind of loves clematis. We do have a native clematis, a little bit less showy, but really, really cool seed heads. And so that's the Virgin Bower clematis. Has great white flowers, smells great, full to part sun, medium to medium wet soil, and a little bit of a later summer bloom for you there. We also have, Virginia creeper. Some people don't like Virginia creeper because it's a healthy grower. I love it because I love the berries look so cool. The fall foliage is amazing. And this is something that can grow in a lot of different environments and also can act as a ground cover. So ground covers, vines can sometimes act like ground covers as well. And I personally love it. I think it looks great. Another invasive vine that may or may not be in folks' backyards is Japanese honeysuckle. So also introduced in the 1800s. This is a woody vine as well. It also can do the, in a bad way, the creeping and acting as kind of a ground cover. So this is planted obviously for ornamental purposes, but also like bittersweet for erosion control, highway landscaping. A lot of mistakes, made when people didn't really know better a long time ago. This is more common. There's a lot more instances in the lower peninsula Michigan, but it's definitely still around here in Northwest Michigan. And so this is an interesting species. Not only are the honeysuckle species kind of problematic, we had our trees and shrubs webinar with our bush honeysuckles, as we call them, the shrubs that are invasive. We have the invasive vine as well. And so this invasives have a lot of implications when it comes to climate change, not only the warming kind of shifting of species and what they can, their ranges and where they can exist, where are good circumstances for them to exist, and the reduction in really harsh winters are allowing more species to kind of migrate a little bit further up the lower peninsula in particular. And so this species in particular has a higher growth rate with more CO2 than other honeysuckles as well. And so that's just something to keep in mind for most invasives, where their range can expand their ranges a little bit, which is not something we want. It can also expand native plants ranges as well, which is an upside. And so this is something that is heavily regulated as well in the Midwest, not in Michigan, as you'll see, still legal for sale. It spreads mostly vegetatively by rooting at stem nodes and forming new root crowns. So it'll grow a little bit and then it'll be able to be severed from its like mother plant pretty easily. And it also underneath the ground can create overlapping roots, which make it particularly hard to get rid of. I'll get to management in a minute for both of these vines. So it can, grow underground, it can grow vertically. It mostly spreads by vegetatively, but it also does have seeds. Same kind of thing, invades forest edges, open or disturbed woodlands, floodplains, old fields, right-of-ways. It's shade tolerant, like many invasives. It does prefer full sun for this one. And similar to invasive bittersweet, it can girdle small trees and shrubs, not necessarily the big giant ones that bittersweet can, outcompetes native species, and it's extremely adaptable to poor soils, which is a common characteristic for all invasives. Native alternatives to Japanese honeysuckle include our native honeysuckle vine, trumpet honeysuckle. This is a healthy grower as well. This isn't something I would recommend to a gardener who just wants to have something grow and just kind of like stay in its place. This is a beautiful vine in particular for hummingbirds. They really like the shape of that flower to get that nectar. Full to part sun, medium soil, good climber or ground cover as well, depending on, it will climb. And then we also have a red honeysuckle, which is a native honeysuckle that you don't see around as often, not as horticulturally available, but still really cool, really good replacement. So that one, you can have a little bit drier soil, and that one does behave a little bit better where it stays a little on the shorter end as well. All right, so invasive species management. For all invasives, the #1 method is prevention. That's why we have the Go Beyond Beauty program. Plant landscape alternatives, plant native plants instead. My personal philosophy when I talk to folks is if you don't really care about habitat, don't plant ornamental invasives purely for your future self. Some of them are really, really hard to get rid of. And why would you put yourself in a situation where if you want to change an area, it's going to be really hard to get rid of some of these. Some of these plants, depending on how bad your infestation is, can be, upwards, I don't want to throw out a number, but like many years in a lot of cases. And so when you're thinking of invasive species management, really consider realistically your resources, your time, your physical ability, your money, and then align that with your goals. But invasive species is not a one and done, no matter what method you choose. And that early detection is important. And I want to talk a little bit about prioritization, which I mentioned earlier. You want to go after the higher priority species. And then you also want to prioritize satellite populations and then populations that are on the edges. I like to look at the transition species dream. They love that area, those transition zones. And, you know, to focus on those spots before you go after a giant monoculture, because that's going to be the best use of your resources, because you have to think about the seed bank if you have an infestation of something. And this goes for not just ground covers and vines, any invasive. If you have a monoculture, the seed bank is going to be rich with those, and you're going to be paying attention to that area for a long time. But the satellite populations might not have much in the seed bank. You know, the populations that are intermixed with other species, but you know, potentially native species, those are the ones that you should really be picking first. And so early detection is hugely important. But no matter your method, invasive species management is not a one and done, and that there will likely be resprouting, and there is likely seeds in the seed bank that we need to consider. So even if you get rid of all of the plants above ground, you have to keep monitoring year after year in those spots to make sure you get the ones that do pop up. And then I did want to note, invasive species love a disturbed area or a bare area. So if you do manage any invasive species, please plant something in place or do something with that area. Give that area a job after you get rid of those invasives. You kind of have to tell it what you want it to do. And so for invasive vines specifically, you have mechanical treatments, and then you have chemical treatments. So keep in mind that with mechanical treatments, incomplete removal will lead to regrowth, and that cutting for most invasives, cutting alone often leads to increased density. Some invasives love it. They want to be cut. They'll keep coming back. They love it. Or they'll send runners in the case of vines. They'll be like, okay, we're not happy here. Something's happening. We're gonna burrow under and then pop up 5 feet over there because that's not working out for us in this area. So for mechanical treatments, it is possible to hand pull or dig, depending on how big your plant is, how big your infestation is. And then there's not really realistic options for most people. There is prescribed fire or goats that, you know, repeatedly eat invasive species. But for mechanical treatments, it's good to know that you will probably have some regrowth if you do not get the entire plant. For chemical treatments, if that's something that you are comfortable with, again, I don't know what's best for your area, and there's not a one fix it for everyone's space. It totally depends on what you have and what's nearby and how long it's been there and all that kind of good stuff. So for your particular situation, if you're not sure what to do, contact ISN or your local SISMA if you're not from our area on what would be the best option for your site in particular. But I can't tell you what's the best option for you. Only you can really determine that for yourself. And so if you do choose a chemical treatment, it is effective for both of those invasive vines and other invasive vines. Select your herbicide carefully, read all label directions. There's a huge label that gives you everything you need usually, and wear personal protective equipment. You know, cover your eyes, cover your hands, that sort of thing. So 2 options for chemical treatments are cut stump treatments, which if you saw our trees, invasive trees and shrubs webinar that we did originally, we went over the cut stump method here. We have kind of a photo where you cut as low to the ground as you can and get an herbicide just on that cambium layer of the stump where all the nutrients are flowing. And then a foliar spray for the leaves, depending on how big your infestation is or what your priorities are. You can do a foliar spray, but I would urge folks to think about how waxy the leaves are. And again, you know, I'm talking about 2 vines in particular that these work for. These are practices that can be applied to other woody vines, but it depends on your species. So please contact ISN or your SISMA. But in general, you can take these ideas and kind of apply them to other invasive vines for the most part. So active ingredients for herbicides, I can't recommend you guys a name brand. That's not something I'm allowed to do, but I can tell you the active ingredients that you can look out for invasive vines if you choose to do a chemical treatment. You have glyphosate and then triclopyr. So glyphosate is an active ingredient in an herbicides that are non-selective. So anything that touches, gets sprayed will, it'll work. It's a systemic herbicide. It'll take it down to the roots and it'll hopefully kill that plant. Like I said, it's not a one and done. It's not a guarantee for chemical treatments. Triclopyr, an active ingredient in other herbicides, is a selective herbicide where it won't, if you have an invasive amongst a bunch of grasses, it will not affect monocots. And so it won't affect your grasses if that's something you're concerned about. Considerations though, for chemical treatments are fruiting times. You do not want to be applying any herbicide at the time when a plant is fruiting out. And you want to avoid early spring as well. And why this is because think about where the nutrients are going in a plant at certain times of year. In spring, all the nutrients are coming out into the leaves, coming out into the fruit when it's fruiting time. We want to avoid those times and get it, especially when the nutrients are flowing downward into the roots. And so considerations for chemical treatments are water bodies. If you are near any sort of water source, not only do you need an aquatic safe herbicide, which these 2 listed are not really, you need a permit, a permit to spray herbicides near any sort of water source. And so again, contact ISN if that's your particular scenario. But most invasive species management, I think, is really effective when you have a combination of techniques. If you're just like a homeowner and you're not a professional going out and managing invasives. So this can look like cutting, you know, a first round of vines and then chemically treating the regrowth with either method. And, you know, waiting 2 weeks, seeing what sprouts up, that sort of thing. Or that can look like digging plants in one area. Say you have some things you're concerned about, whether it's plants or I don't know what's in your yard, you know, a play place, that kind of thing. You can dig out the species that are there, but then treat the other ones in a different area. And so keep in mind that it doesn't have to be one or the other. All right, getting into some examples of invasive ground covers. And so creeping jenny, also known as moneywort, is a very, very short herbaceous ground cover. And so it was introduced from Europe and Southwest Asia. It's very, very low growing. It was planted for ornamental purposes, of course. I like to joke that you can't really find a hanging basket without creeping jenny anymore. I think it's like a trend or something. I mean, it is very beautiful, but again, we're trying to go above and beyond beauty, just beauty, to go for habitat function, or at the very least to not harm habitat. And this is something in particular, I used to garden for a local landscaper here. This is something that it made it so hard to plant in this one area, this one bed that a client had. She had creeping jenny. It's just a thick mat. You can barely get into it to plant other things. And it's just so, you know, it's not like woody where you can like pull up and the roots follow. It's very personally annoying. And so it spreads mostly vegetatively by the creeping stems, thus the name. It forms a dense mat-like ground cover. It also spreads by seeds. This is something we're really concerned about for our wetland areas. We see this starting to pop up around boat launches and things like that. Even a tiny little piece can create a new plant. And so meadows, forests, floodplains, that sort of thing. This is something that's not as regulated, but it is banned in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And its threat to habitat, obviously the dense mats prohibit native plant establishment. It outcompetes native species because of that. And it also can impede water flow when it's in a more aquatic environment. And that's not something that we want to see in our wetlands and our water loving environments. So native alternatives to creeping Jenny include partridge berry, so cute. If you like that really, really short ground cover, this is a great one. It's not necessarily a full sun one, but it is something that's really great in woodlands and things like that. If you have a little shadier area, it can tolerate not a lot of moisture and very petite. I love to see that when I'm out and about in the summer. And the spring cinquefoil, which is kind of an underutilized ground cover in my opinion. It's got these really cute leaves that kind of look like, you almost confuse it for a wild strawberry when you see it when you're out and about. But it has that yellow flower that folks like, full sun to part shade, very versatile. It also kind of forms little mats or little groupings as well, if that's what you like in the creeping Jenny. So winter creeper is another a woody ground cover. It can actually be a vine, a shrub, and a ground cover. There are many cultivars of this species. It was planted ornamentally, of course, and it has many cultivars, including the visuals, like variegated varieties are definitely abound. And this is something that you see climbing trees. It'll climb your house. Our old ISN coordinator, Katie Griziak, said, that her house burned down when she was a kid, and the only thing standing was like the chimney and this winter creeper that they had. So pretty indestructible, according to her. And this is something that's very common when I do my site visits. This is something that spreads by seed and vegetatively, vertically and horizontally. It's regulated in a couple states, but not many. And that's not many people know about winter creeper, which is kind of why I chose it for this. It invades forested habitats, riparian areas. It can, like a lot of invasives, it can tolerate a lot of different soil moistures and types. And its shade tolerance lets it thrive in undisturbed forestland. So this reduces photosynthesis for our native species, our trees, ground covers, that sort of thing. It outcompetes native species, not letting them get into that space. It prevents the regeneration of native trees. This is something that woodlots, people who manage woodlots are concerned about, because it can slow the growth rate of our native trees that they're using as a source of lumber. And this potentially alters nutrient cycling on the forest floor. It's thought to increase decomposition, which is not necessarily a good thing, because this is not the environment that it evolved in. And so lots of concerning, very special things about winter creeper as well. So some native alternatives. There is creeping snowberry, which has these cute little white berries. This is a full shade species, a little wetter. So kind of typically environments that are kind of hard to find native species. I tried to give you guys a variety. It likes colder, more acidic sites, if you have more sand, that kind of thing. Also fragrant sumac. You might have saw this in our first webinar. It's a awesome native species that I like to recommend to folks. It has, if you've ever been to the Boardman River Nature Center in Traverse City, that's what is lining our walkway. This can be a hedgerow. This can be a single plant. The name comes from when you crush its leaves. It smells a little bit lemony, and it has great fall color. And that's something that likes sunny, drier sites. And so I know that I advertised to you all that we would just do a handful of species, but I know that there are folks that are concerned about, we had a couple questions about English ivy, and then I also wanted to touch on some other species. And so I took this off of our Go Beyond Beauty social media. as an example of some invasive ground covers to avoid and native ground covers to use instead. But there's lily of the valley. Some people are surprised to hear that that's an invasive ground cover. Sweet woodruff is like sticky. You know, if you touch it, it'll kind of stick to you. Forget-me-nots, snow on the mountain, or bishop scoutweed, also known as English ivy, of course, also in many, many hanging baskets. And so some of the techniques that we will talk about and we talked about can apply to other ornamental ground covers, and then not pictured is vinca or myrtle, which a lot of people have an issue with as well. And so these are some other good ground covers to know. I can't go over all of them in this webinar, but I will note on some great native ground covers used. I'm going to first about wild strawberry because not only can it take a little bit of foot traffic, which people like, it is a full sun to kind of full shade species. It's happier in the sun. But that's something that the runners, you can kind of corral them into one area. This is great. You know, in our local park, we have just a whole, you know, they had obviously planted grasses, but there's a whole swath of wild strawberry that, you know, has clearly been there for years and is a great little mat that dogs and people can run on, that sort of thing. And you can put it in hanging baskets since it has the runners. It has a nice little droopy effect. Love that one. And that's a full sun, full shade species. For shadier species, or no, I'll go back to the sunny species. We do have the fragrant sumac, like I talked about, and bearberry, which is kind of an evergreen shrub, kind of a slow growing, kind of waxier leaved shrub. That's a really cool species, full sun, pure sand. If you go to Sleeping Bear, you'll see that growing in just pure sand. And then for our shadier species, we have Canada anemone. I like this in some planters in shadier spots as well. Same with wild geranium, a little bit shadier woodland species, really cute. Both of those have such great foliage when they're not in bloom. Speaking of great foliage though, wild ginger in the kind of shadier, wetter spots. This is a great species. It looks super cool. It does not stay up all year long. So like, you know, late summer, that's going to be pretty much gone into the fall. But those are some great native ground covers to use instead. And other invasive vines to know are porcelain berry, swallowwort, chocolate vine, and Chinese yam. But we're going to get into the management for ground covers specifically. And mechanical treatment, same thing. If you don't remove all of the plant, it can regrow. Sometimes it really likes that too. But mechanical treatments, you have a lot more options for ground covers than vines. You have the hand pulling, the digging, of course, but then also you have weed whipping and mowing, depending on your species. Of course, creeping Jenny, you can't really mow over it because it's so short, but something that has bigger leaves, such as, you know, bishop scoutweed that we had, or depending on the size of your winter creeper, or the size of your English ivy, you can mow with your mower on the lowest setting. It would be a continuous effort to keep weed whipping or mowing. You can also use a rake to, because, you know, it's with all the spindly little suckers and shoots, it's really hard to know where the actual roots are for these plants. You can take a rake and rake it up, and then you can kind of find where that root is and take it by the hand. Or it's just a way to kind of get that vegetation off the surface. And then also smothering is a good method. There are different techniques to this. This is something that I use personally in my garden, even when it's just like crabgrass kind of thing. But you can cover your infestation with a tarp for one growing season. People use this method often to replant lawns. You know, there's like into meadow or into whatever, where you leave a tarp or leave something heavy for one growing season. Now you can use a clear tarp and have the seed bank, everything die, and the seed bank will come up again and then be killed because of the heat. Or you can have something dark. You know, I've heard people even use, like, they wanted one small area, so they did a rug, an old rug that they had over the season. But you can do that. That won't exhaust the seed bank any, but it will just kill what's on top. And then after you do that, you can replant, do whatever you want with that space. There's also a technique of cutting, you know, with the raking method, the weed whipping method, cutting your plant, covering for a growing seed or covering, and then planting over. And so whether you use landscape fabric, quite a bit of cardboard, or mulch, where you can kind of, if you reduce the access to light for the seed bank, then you can plant over or interplant. So, and you can even use the combination techniques where maybe you do that for a growing season, and then you leave the landscape fabric or whatever you're using, and then you cut a hole and plant in that mulch over. There's a lot of different options. I can't say what's best for you, but those are some really good mechanical treatments if you don't want to use chemicals. But some chemical treatments, if you're comfortable, of course, select carefully, read all label directions, and wear PPE. You only have the option of foliar spraying, which is spraying the leaves. And keep in mind that some of these leaves, like the winter creeper, vinca, you know, that sort of thing, their leaves are a lot more waxy. So you have to be careful on when you're using that, and how being sure that it can actually penetrate the leaf because of that wax. But active ingredients are the same. We have the non-selective glyphosate and the selective triclopyr for active ingredients. And I do want to note that if your local ISN does have a list of retailers that do sell herbicides locally, and a list of at least, you know, whenever it was updated 2 years ago, of what they were offering. And so keep that in mind. And then if you want to pay someone to do it, we do have a list of herbicide contractors that are in the area. And just a list, this is not an endorsement of their businesses. It's not an endorsement of whoever sells those herbicides, those businesses. It's just a list of what was available. And so some considerations are the same for invasive ground covers. The flowering and fruiting time, please do not you know, spray when things are flowering or fruiting. And timing, avoid early spring as well. And water bodies, you need a permit to do that, and an aquatic safe herbicide. I do want to note that unfortunately creeping jenny is herbicide resistant. And so you only, for that species in particular, like I said, you can apply these kind of generally, but with specific species, it does matter. And so creeping jenny is something that you only have mechanical techniques for, which is a huge bummer. And so even if you have a big, you know, people say that chemical treatments are often like a last resort, that's not available for certain species. And so it's not necessarily a one and done, like I said. And then you can do combination techniques, like I said before, cut and chemically treat regrowth, or digging plants in one area, treating them in another. You do what works best for you, and contact ISN or your local SISMA if you're not sure what that is or if you need advice. So invasive species disposal, I do want to note that if any, this applies to all invasive species, but if something's fruiting, as far as disposal, please do not remove that from the site, because if you have something that's fruiting or dropping berries, we don't want to be transporting that. So we typically tell people either just wait till the next season or leave it in place, basically. So, you know, if you cut things, just to leave it there for the time being, you know, like I said before, the seed bank is already probably rife with those seeds anyway, and then you're not introducing it to new areas. There are like brush piles and kind of compost, that sort of thing. I would be very careful with composting creeping jenny in particular. You would have to have a really active compost system and not just kind of like a compost pile out back that kind of breaks down over the years. Burning is an option if you want to dry out certain species. You do need to look up your local ordinances because you may need a burn permit. I don't know your county. I don't know where you guys live, but you may need one. And then I did want to point out that invasive species are different from yard clippings as far as waste management. And so, but your local trash collector will not know if you have invasive species versus just regular plants. And so to contact your trash provider, most will take them. Sometimes you have to bring it to the landfill directly. Sometimes you can pay a little extra. Sometimes it's no big deal at all. But there also is the Michigan Citizens Guide to Invasive Plant Disposal as well online, and we'll link that with the follow-up email. And avoiding ornamental invasives really quickly. By native species, they by definition can't be invasive. If you don't know what's invasive, contact ISN, your local SISMA. Look for scientific names. Avoid buying plants with only common names like ornamental grass or ornamental ground cover. Like, what is that? You know, you can do a quick Google, and I would recommend going to the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. They have a really great species information sheets. And I typically tell folks, if your species that you're trying to buy is not on that list, you should be reasonably good to go. You can also report invasive species as well. If you're tuning in from outside Northwest Michigan, you can find your local SISMA, which is your local invasive species, experts, your organization there to help you, just like ISN is in our area. And the woody invasives of the Great Lakes Collaborative, there are woody ground covers. So there's information on there about those, our website, and then the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. We'll send this all out. Here's some books that we like and local offerings through Go Beyond Beauty. If you're local, we'll have Japanese barberry trade-up days in June. This is an opportunity to trade in Japanese barberry, a woody invasive, for a coupon good for a non-invasive alternative. We also hopefully will have, if funding allows, invasive species dumpsters for local folks, work bees and workshops. We also have a tool library, but all of our events for the year are up on our website. So please tune in for that. And I think I only left a few minutes for questions. I'm so sorry. I will plug our last webinar in our series of the herbaceous plants and grasses on April 11th. Please sign up, habitatmatters.org events. And thank you so much for your time. I'm going to check out the Q&A in the chat now. All right. Are there any questions in the chat, or should I just go to the?
Nope, just the Q&A.
Okay. It seems Michigan has less regulations and laws about invasives than other surrounding states. Why is this? The state is working on the information to present to lawmakers, but essentially it goes like this. You have folks who are working for the state, they're working on getting all the information, the research, that sort of thing. They have to compile that for certain species, and then they have to take that to Michigan legislature and say, hey, these are really invasive. Could we potentially ban these from trade? And then it's kind of out of the environmentalists, the environmental folks' hands, whether Michigan wants to do that or not. And so that has not been something that has passed in the years recently. And so that's something that I tell folks, we're not going to be the front runner, probably Michigan isn't, for banning invasive species, but I do think that we will be following up the pack in the caboose. Enough people will ban species around us, and I think that will be good enough reasoning for our Michigan legislature to approve those bills. But that's, the science is there for a lot of species, but it's just a matter of legislature deeming that good enough to pass or not, because a lot of these people who sell invasive species, it's cheap. It's a good way for them to make money. And I know certain people don't want to impact like the economy or trades or the environmental field that way. There's also lobbying from certain sectors who want to keep distributing those and selling those. And so that's kind of an overarching reason why they have not been, all of these species haven't been banned. And it's just priorities, So that's why we have a Go Beyond Beauty, and a voluntary program, grassroots program, until we can ban those species. And folks with the native plant movement and everything like that, I think folks are really kind of analyzing what's in their yard and what they're buying. And I do think that hopefully from the consumer end, it'll be less in demand, and hopefully it won't be as profitable in the future. And another question, can you re-explain not treating plants when berries are present? Yes, and so please do not, if you have a plant that's berrying out, not only do you really not want to move that plant after you've treated it, or like the disposal end, because we don't want berries to drop. We don't want new infestations. The area around that plant probably already has those seeds in the seed bank. But think about when you do systemic herbicides for the chemical treatments, it's like, where are the nutrients flowing? When things are fruiting out, the nutrients are flowing outward into the fruits, into the leaves. We want to use herbicides when the nutrients are flowing into the roots, because that's what's going to kill the plant. And so to make for the efficacy of the herbicides, and then also we don't want that ending up into the fruits or the leaves. Okay, great. Anything else? Nope. I will check out this commentary. I appreciate everyone putting stuff in the chats, but I think we're going to end our recording now. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions about Go Beyond Beauty, ornamental invasives, or anything like that, I have my email listed up there. I sent, of course, you guys all this link, and I will follow up with not only the recording, but the list of resources that we mentioned in this presentation, as well as a survey. If you guys could take our post-webinar survey, that gives us a lot of good feedback that we can put into the next webinar, and then also outreach as well. Thank you so much, guys.